Welcome to my apartment of 26 years. My name is Gary Mizell, M-I-Z-E-L. When I introduce myself, because I'm not a very well-known person, people seem to recognize me whenever I walk around the city. I get different expressions from probably 70 to 80% of the people that live in New York City, because I've been here for such a long time, and I used to vacation here when I had a tremendous amount of money in my younger days. So it's kind of a phenomenon that I'm one of the most recognized people in the city, but nobody knows my name. They just recognize my face and my persona. But my name is Gary Mizell, from the Mizellowski family. We were the most powerful family in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics back in 1898. My family owned a grain mill, and we were milling wheat. And we were wealthy Russian Jews, but we were of the people. We were more closely allied to our neighbors, the Jews that we made a matzah for, the, I guess, Christians that we made bread for. There were a lot of Muslims in Russia, but I don't know if we were serving them or not. So if you have the kind of power that we had in Minsk, in Belarus, we're from Belarusia. So we opposed Tsar Nicholas II. That was the last Russian Tsar. So he was already living in Siberia when he attacked my family in 1899. They took away our business and took away our money and forced us to emigrate to the United States in 1900. So if you're the most powerful family in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, like back in the USSR by the Beatles, where, you know, George is on my mind, that's a province of Russia, Georgia. It's probably the largest one. So if you show up at Ellis Island and you're the most powerful family in Russia, believe me, the government knows who you are. So from the moment we came to Ellis Island, instead of being settled on the East Coast where most immigrants were settled, we were settled in Omaha, Nebraska, so we could be back in the Farm Belt. And my grandfather, Abraham, Abe Mizellowski, settled in Omaha with his wife, Lena. So it was Abe and Lena Mizellowski. But at Ellis Island, they shortened their name because Mizellowski is too complicated. So they shortened the name to M-I-Z-E-L. And my grandfather was illiterate and he didn't understand phonetics, so he pronounced it Mizell. And so Abe and Lena Mizell in Omaha, Nebraska. So eventually my grandfather Abe, who was quite a successful entrepreneur, he had an entrepreneurial mind and spirit. He was able to accumulate enough money in the grocery business for the government to move us into a wealthy region so we could be back in the sphere that we started in, the sphere of wealth and power. The last thing that happened while we were in Omaha were two things. Number one, Tsar Nicholas II and his family were invited to pose for a photo shoot, and they were all shot dead. So the Tsar, the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, who took away our business and forced us out of Russia, was massacred along with his family. And then we somehow were connected to Warren Buffett. The government left us connected to Warren Buffett when they moved us to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1915. It was called Tulsi Town, and it was the oil capital of the world. So the government's plan was to power us up financially and then use us politically. So one of the things that they did was they advised my grandfather Abe, this is not something that happens directly. It's not like this is an intelligence agent calling you. They work through other families. So if you're a Jewish family in Tulsa, Oklahoma, then you're in the oil business, because all the families in Tulsa were all connected to two synagogues, B'nai Emunah, where I went to Hebrew school, and Temple Israel, where I was bar mitzvah. B'nai Emunah is a Orthodox synagogue, so I went to Hebrew school there and had an Orthodox educational background. But my mother wanted me to have a more simple bar mitzvah and not to go through the rigors of a 4-hour ceremony. So Temple Israel was a Reform synagogue in Tulsa. The government advised us through family relationships in the oil business to move to a location across the street from Peoria Boulevard. We were in between Woodward Park and the Lewis area, which included Utica Square. In this neighborhood, you have a combination of modest homes where my grandfather and grandmother lived in a small, modest home. And just 2 blocks away was the Wheatley family in a mansion that took up almost an entire city block. At the intersection of 41st and Peoria was the home of Bill Francis, which was the largest house in all of Tulsa. It took up an entire block in all 4 directions. You could have built 20 homes on his lot. And of course, Bill Francis was in the oil business, and most of the wealth in Tulsa was oil wealth or something connected to it. So the government, in order to restore our wealth, advised my grandfather to connect in with the Sanditon family, one of the major oil families, and to the Kaiser family. So my Uncle Morris and my father, Salmon Morris, Meisel if you're Morris, or Mizell if you're Sam. My mother wanted the name M-I-Z-E-L to be a classy name, to sound French, so we called ourselves Mizell, and my Uncle Morris was more allied to my grandfather, so he called his family Meisel. So it's the Meisels and the Mizells, connected to the Kaisers and the Sanitons. The way it works is that if you don't know anything about the oil business, then the only way that you can make money is to become partners with the most successful families in Tulsa. So as you know, the government has everybody's tax return. So they simply went through the most wealthy and successful oil families in Tulsa and advised my father and my uncle to become partners in all of the oil investments and operations of those 2 families. And in that way, my father and my uncle became wealthy because my grandfather became very wealthy through those associations. So the way it worked out was the government had my father and my uncle attend Central High School. That was part of the conditioning of moving into that neighborhood. They went to Central High School, and all of the families in Tulsa, not only were they Jewish, but all of their companies were named after the family. Like Herman Kaiser, his company was called Kaiser Francis, along with Bill Francis, the person I mentioned earlier. And the Sanitons, had Saniton Oil, and all the company, the families had companies named after their family name, except for my family. The name of our family business was the Central Oil Company. So my father, during World War II, had fallen arches, flat feet, so he did not have to serve in the infantry. And when he got home from the war, my Uncle Morris and my grandfather Abe had made a fortune in the oil business, so when my father came back from the war, they simply gave him his 1/3. So my uncle was in the carpet business. My father mostly played with investments in the commodities markets. Neither of them knew much about the oil business. My father had a doodle bug, and he would drive around with some kind of equipment installed in his Buick LeSabre, and it was not very sophisticated, but if he would drive over a railroad track and the doodlebug would go up and down, he would say, oh, there's oil here, because he didn't really know much about the oil business, but it didn't make any difference because his partners were making a fortune for themselves and him and my uncle. So my uncle had a carpet land, and he had, his oil investments in the back room. And at one point, my father and my uncle were partners, in their office space. So I'm trying to condense my story, and the bottom line is that my family, when the Central Intelligence Agency was created in 1947 through the NSA, the National Security Administration, the fact that we were the Central Oil Company, and my father and my uncle went to Central High School, that laid the groundwork for the evolution of the Central Intelligence Agency. So you're talking to a space where I contend that there are 30 cameras, receivers, and microphones in this 500 square foot apartment where I've been living for 26 years, which includes that stairwell there. So I know everything about the intelligence agencies. I know everything about their programs. I know the names of their programs, how they evolved, how they came into being, who operates them, and I'm going to give you some top secret information that you cannot hear anywhere else. I have tremendous political power. Now, I want to tell you where this power comes from, who I'm connected to, and you should know that the people that I'm going to mention and the programs that I'm going to mention would lead to my assassination. It has taken a rare balance of savvy and street smarts and a lot of help that I receive, a lot of advice that I receive to be able to stay alive, knowing what I know and putting it out there as I do. The last show that I did, show 22, was done right here in this apartment. And the person who's filming this show, he directed and edited all 21 shows of cultural, business, and entertainment requested by the Time Warner system in Baltimore, and they played it all over the state of Maryland. I was famous in Maryland, whereas nobody knew me here in New York City. I was getting calls from people in Maryland. Now, what happens when Time Warner wants your show to play all over the state of Maryland when you're only on public access here? And the answer is, I was being used by the intelligence agencies. And so what that did was it laid the groundwork for Mike Bloomberg to move here from Maryland and become the mayor of New York City for 12 years, during which time he made $2 billion a year as the mayor. His alma mater was Johns Hopkins University. They send Dr. Luke over here to take blood samples from me that go into their genetics department under the supervision of Dr. Ann Pulver. My letter to Ann Pulver is in one of these stacks of letters. The genetics newsletter comes to me. I have 2 of those that I made copies of. In addition to this, Mike Bloomberg recruited me to his synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, which is the most powerful synagogue in the world outside of the state of Israel. Those synagogues in Israel have political power because of their meaningfulness, the fact that they're in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. But Temple Emmanuel here on 65th and I believe it's 5th Avenue, 65th and 5th Avenue. That's the most powerful synagogue in New York City because the membership is worth about $65 billion. Bloomberg on his own is worth $35 billion, and there's another $35 billion net worth for all the wealthy Jews have assembled at Temple Emmanuel. So I want you to know that the CIA can make a camera. This is my Higgins PT305 coffee cup. I'm an expert in the coffee business. The 5 top coffee producers in the world are number 1, Brazil, number 2, Vietnam, number 3, Colombia, number 4, Ecuador, and number 5, Mexico. I know everything about the coffee business. I have artwork in this apartment connecting to Vietnam and Mexico. The painting in the background and all of my artwork were created by an artist named Anki King. She was born in Norway, and I met her when she was at the Art Students League, and she was on staff there. And people that went to the Art Students League, Roy Lichtenstein, whose paintings are all over the subway, Georgia O'Keeffe, Willem de Kooning, the masters of the art movement here in the 1930s, most of them are connected to the Art Students League. It's probably the most famous and high quality art teaching facility in the world. It certainly has a tremendous alumni association. I guess there's a name for that movement that escapes me at this moment, but one of the artists there was Arshile Gorky, who was connected to de Kooning, Jackson Pollock, and all of these famous artists that created the famous movement in the 30s and 40s. They're all connected to Arshile Gorky. I'm the world's foremost expert on Arshile Gorky because my professor of qualitative studies at the University of Oklahoma was Arshile Gorky's nephew. So he would invite me to his apartment, he would paint in front of me and tell me the most intimate and personal stories about Arshile Gorky, so nobody knows more about him than me. A Gorky that size would cost us $75 million if you could even get one. They're priceless, so they never come on the market. So it was called the New York School. That was the name of the movement, the New York School. And it involved all these artists. So the professor of quantitative studies was Jack Bickham, who published 50 Western novels. One was purchased by the Walt Disney Corporation, which became the Apple Dumpling Gang, and brought in $600 million for Walt Disney. So, you know, I had a education at the highest level at the University of Oklahoma. And the reason this all took place is because I was sent to the University of Oklahoma by my mother's boyfriend, Colonel Irvin M. Kent. So the name of my play was Looking for Irvs, and then that became scene 7 of my play, Looking for Irvs. That's Colonel Irvin M. Kent, a colonel in the U.S. Army, a prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials, somebody who was directly involved with the execution of Adolf Eichmann, and somebody that showed me top secret information because he loved me because he was in love with my mother. So I saw all these documents that were classified as for the eyes of Colonel Kent only. One of them was actually a top secret document to Alexander Haig. I wrote all this in a letter to Mike Bloomberg, and that's why you see all these generals in the White House now. This accumulated over a period of time. So the reason that the Trump administration has all these generals is because they used my letter to Bloomberg to bring in General David Petraeus and then all these other generals at the White House. So now I'm going to tell you what's going on in Washington because I'm the only person in the world that can tell you this. And anybody else that would say what I'm going to be saying in the next 5 minutes would be murdered by the intelligence agencies 100 times over. And they cannot touch me. My life is protected by the Russians, the Chinese, the Persians, and insiders at all of the intelligence agencies because that's how important I am with what I know and what I haven't even revealed yet with regard to science, physics, and biochemistry, and all of those kinds of things. All right, so here's the bottom line. The CIA can create a camera the size of this ballpoint pen. There are cameras all over this place. There are receivers all over this place. There are visual devices inside my television that were not planted there. They came through the current in my wall sockets. When I walk around the neighborhood, when I come underneath that bridge, in the evening, the lights go on as I'm walking under the bridge. If it's in the daytime, the lights go off when I'm walking under the bridge. They're not necessarily trying to show me what they can do. These are all programs that have evolved from me because when I moved into this apartment, that Verizon landline was already tapped by the FBI and the CIA. So that's 26 years of Verizon landline. So therefore, I had to get rid of my Dell computer. I never had a cell phone. I never had an iPod. I have a communication system like nobody else in the world. I don't need anything that's electronic because everything I'm saying is going to places that you wouldn't believe. This is an email to my trustee, Jeanette Goodwin. Everything in here is based on oil, minerals that I own, all stolen. I have contracts in here where you can say, see, I was sent a check for $127,000. I never received the money. The trustee before Jeanette Goodwin took an $8,000 commission and resigned. Jeanette Goodwin took over the trust and would not give me one nickel of the $119,000 that I received, not a nickel of the $50,000 to $60,000 that was already there, and cut me off completely from the $2,500 a month that I was receiving, because I'm too powerful as a whistleblower to have any money at all. So I don't. And here's the proof of all the hijacked money. This is CIA headquarters in Denver, where my cousin Larry Meisel lives. He's the largest real estate developer in the United States. His company, MDC Holdings, is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It stands for Meisel Development Corporation. He went public in 1970 through Richard M. Nixon. The reason that I live in Astoria is because this is a Greek neighborhood. The reason that Richard Nixon had a Greek vice president, Spiro Agnew, is because Jacqueline Kennedy married Aristotle Onassis, the Greek shipping tycoon, and became Jackie O. The reason that Oprah Winfrey created O Magazine is because she followed me here from Denver to continue to spy on me and suppress me, my projects, my money, and everything else about my life, because my entire life has been dedicated to the empowerment of blacks and Hispanics. She works as an adjunct to Larry Meisel, who's the original thief of my name and money. I have payments from the intelligence agencies for what I do. I'm the foremost whistleblower with regard to the Trump administration. Here's $200,000 of stolen capital, connected to $3 billion more. That was all sent to Congresswoman Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. That letter has been sent to her 3 times. She's never seen it. This is the letter to the New York Times about the trash out front, how the trash cans are a CIA program. Here's a 3-page letter based upon, this is Cheryl Atkinson. It's a 7-page letter to the company that published this book, Stonewall, to the publisher HarperCollins. So HarperCollins has the program that operates this entire network. This 7-page book proposal operates every house in this neighborhood. That's a Verizon landline. This is the Verizon 10K. I'm a broker-dealer. My company, Meisel Securities, created in July of 1985, was 2 pages away from Merrill Lynch in the NASD manual. I can get these 10Ks from Mary Jo White, who was a former head of the SEC. This Verizon 10K, that's my Verizon landline, is loaded with letters that apply to this 10K. All 20,000 public companies in the United States submit this document to the SEC. This document has qualitative and quantitative analysis that I just explained to you that was in a letter to Leslie Moonves in 2012. Now everybody has to report those 2 categories. Everybody has to report according to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which is an article that I wrote in 2009 for the National Minority Business Council. Okay, so if you're somebody that contributes 2 major classifications to a document that every public company in America has to comply with, then you can charge $2,000 an hour and people will line up for a year to have a meeting with you. Well, nobody knows where that information came from, so I don't receive any benefit from it. Now, what is happening in Washington, D.C.? The reason that Donald Trump asked the Chinese to investigate the Biden family, Hunter Biden, is because when I was incarcerated on 3 separate occasions, Holliswood Hospital and Army Hospital in Holliswood, New York, 2 months in a psych ward when Bloomberg was the mayor, the idea was to connect him with General David Petraeus, who was head of the CIA. Bloomberg moved Petraeus to Colbert, Kravitz, and Roberts, the largest mergers and acquisitions firm on Wall Street. That's Henry Kravitz, the oil billionaire from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I'm from. He was replaced by John O'Brien. So I'm connected to the CIA directly that way. Petraeus was bringing in all these generals that you see in the Trump administration. Larry Meisel, the largest real estate developer in the United States, sent his two children, Courtney and Cheston Meisel, to Trump's alma mater, the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia. What do they have to do with Philadelphia? Larry was born in Denver. His kids live in LA. There's no connection to Philadelphia whatsoever other than to connect it with Donald Trump. The reason Nixon's vice president was Spiro Agnew, who I believe he went to jail along with John Mitchell, was because of Jacqueline Kennedy marrying Aristotle Onassis. That became Jackie O. Oprah Winfrey created O Magazine based on Jackie O. Oprah Winfrey's Greek. She has nothing to do with black people other than screwing them over. And she's murdered 7 people now through her power at the CIA, where she has the power to assassinate people. I was supposed to be death number 6 when she took care of Penny Marshall, Laverne and Shirley. Okay, that's Linda Laverne on NBC, who is now Linda Vaquero. That's the Laverne. And Shirley was Shirley Booth, who played Hazel. That's now Hazel Sanchez, because at this security seminar, which I have a copy of that was covered by the Denver Post and names my company, Meisel Securities, and there is the source of all this information. Ron Sanchez was held out of that securities conference so that Larry Meisel and the CIA could control the narrative. So Larry Meisel brought Ronald Reagan to Denver in 1984, raised $1 million for Reagan. He wasn't interested in Reagan at all. He was interested in his vice president, George Bush, who was the head of the CIA. So he raised $1 million for Bush and then became connected to Bush's kids, Neil Bush at Silverado, Jeb Bush, governor of Florida, and George Jr., who became president for 8 more years. This is all CIA. The White House is, and this country is completely saturated by the CIA. The mainstream media is controlled by the Pentagon. So what is happening now in Washington, D.C.? America is under attack. America is under assault, just like Pearl Harbor, through the executive branch of the U.S. government, represented by Donald Trump, who represents a plethora of generals at the Pentagon. This is a 35-year-old program. This is the result of 35 years of preparation, all done through Larry Meisel and Oprah Winfrey, and the result is Donald Trump. Larry Meisel has a CIA file. I called the White House to give the name of the CIA file. The call was cut off by the CIA. The Secret Service showed up here, spent 45 minutes with the Secret Service right there. They took a voluminous amount of information from me. I'm now the foremost whistleblower with regard to the Trump administration. The Pentagon is attempting to take over the United States of America. All these generals that were serving Donald Trump, Madison, Flynn, and McMaster, they all serve on the boards of directors of Northrop, General Dynamics, Martin Marietta, all the arms manufacturers. That's where we are in constant war all over the world. 192 military bases worldwide. Wars going on all the time to empower generals and create billionaires and control this country entirely. And now the idea is to spread ourselves throughout the rest of the world and take over the entire world, because this is what generals think about. World conquest, world domination. What do generals do for a living? Kill people and assassinate political leaders and overthrow governments. And so that's the bottom line. So everybody's cell phone is monitored within a quarter of a mile. That's called Project Stingray, named after Larry Meisel's Corvette Stingray. And so all of your cell phone calls are captured by the NSA over a 25 quarter mile region. 9/11, the attack on the Twin Towers came from my 9/11 Porsche Targa convertible purchased by Larry Meisel from Storrs Garage when I was driven out of Denver because of my association with the Black Panther Party. So as a former Black Panther, according to the government, I have to live right here in total poverty and try to come out with my information in any way possible. And so that's what I'm doing today. I want to thank you for listening. Donald Trump is going to be impeached. Donald Trump is most likely going to go to jail. And before this is all over with, the people you're going to be seeing on television being prosecuted and getting the Donald Trump treatment are going to be generals accused of the same thing Donald Trump is ultimately going to be accused of, which is treason against the United States. So I want to thank you for being with me. I want to thank you for listening. This is all connected to Higgins, which was Cliff Robertson in the movie 3 Days of the Condor. If you get that movie, 3 Days of the Condor, you'll see basically a documentary about what's taking place in America today. I'm a member of the World War II Museum, a charter member, and proud to say it. Thank you so much.